The Trumpet Daily program begins right now.
There's no doubt in my mind, none, that if Texas or Trump or anyone else in the United States Senate tries to do anything except respect the will of the people of Georgia, they'll move heaven and earth to stop them. Folks, you know, you all did something extraordinary in November. You voted in record numbers. You voted to improve the lives of every Georgian. And you voted as if your life depended on it. Well, guess what? Now you're going to have to do it again. Come January 5th, you got to vote in record numbers again. Because yes.
81 million horns. 81 million. This is the most popular presidential candidate in the history of the United States. That's what we're supposed to believe. The fraud continues. The hoax continues. The rolling coup continues. There he is in Georgia just yesterday. And to put it together with what I talked about yesterday regarding the incredible amount of new voters that Stacey Abrams has found in Georgia, she managed to get 85,000 signed up to vote. For the first time, they didn't even vote on November 3rd. 85,000 in 4 weeks' time. She bragged about 1.2 million absentee ballots going out. They're probably going to surpass. This was the most historic presidential election in American history. And this Senate runoff, just for 2 Senate seats, I guess it's going to be even bigger than the election on November 3rd. We have a lot to get to on today's program. You're listening to the Trumpet Daily radio show. If we have time, I'm going to try to condense what I have into the first half hour so that we have some time left over for the Key of David program that we recorded on Sunday. Immovable and Unshakable is the title that we gave to that one. So we'll try to work our way more toward the lengthier Bible studies that we've had at the back end of each program. Generally speaking, there's just been so much craziness in the news. It fills up an hour of content pretty fast. Yesterday, I guess the big news on a lot of the conservative sites was Mitch McConnell's big announcement now that the Electoral College has spoken. He came out and congratulated the man you just heard there at that Georgia rally with all of the vehicles honking their horns and such. Certainly not 81 million, nothing near. probably 81 would be closer to the truth. In any event, here is the Senate Majority Leader. He's a Republican. He can be pretty ruthless when he needs to be. And here he is abandoning President Trump's effort to expose the voter fraud. This is Senator Mitch McConnell at the floor of the Senate yesterday, clip 2.
Yesterday, electors met in all 50 states. So as of this morning, our country has officially a president-elect and a vice president-elect. Many millions of us had hoped the presidential election would yield a different result. But our system of government has processes to determine who will be sworn in on January the 20th. The Electoral College has spoken. So today I want to congratulate President-elect Joe Biden.
There's Mitch McConnell yesterday. The Electoral College has spoken. On November 7th, the media have spoken. So never mind all of the voter fraud. Never mind all of the lawsuits. Never mind what's being exposed day in and day out. And never mind, I might add, just how much this president has fought for politicians like that, even ones that are pretty much Republicans in name only. He's fought for the Republican Party. He's backed governors when they didn't back him. And look at how quickly we've seen this play out over the last 5-6 weeks. Look at how quickly people have abandoned ship. There's no help. God surveyed the scene and he saw that Jeroboam had no help. That's in 2 Kings 14. And so now the president has to go up against the Senate as well. And just as soon as he makes that statement on the floor of the Senate, then you have these reports like in Politico, of this powerful politician really applying pressure on the other Republican senators ahead of the January 6th meeting to approve of the electors. There can be no dissent. There's some House representatives that are going to contest it, but they've got to get the support of at least one senator. And so here is Mitch McConnell not only congratulating the so-called President-elect Joe Biden, but at the same time, he's trying to pull the rug right out from underneath the president, telling his fellow senators, there shall be no dissent come January 6th. Politico says Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell warned Republican senators Tuesday during a private caucus call not to object to the election results on January 6th, according to two sources familiar with it. It says McConnell told his caucus that challenging the results would force Republicans to take a terrible vote because they would need to vote it down and appear against President Donald Trump. So he doesn't want to go there. He wants to, nicely stab him in the back and then make sure that they don't have to vote one way or another or vote in a way that it looks like they're voting against Donald Trump. They want to have it both ways because they know how popular the president is. They know his 75 million votes are legit. They know this. It says several House Republicans, led by hardline conservative Rep. Mo Brooks, are still planning to challenge the election results on January 6th, the date Congress will officially certify them. And then it quotes Mr. Brooks here. It says, I find it unfathomable that anyone would acquiesce to election theft and voter fraud because they lack the courage to take a difficult vote on the House or Senate floor. See, they just don't want to have that vote. They just want to quietly accept the results. The Electoral College has spoken. Never mind the dueling electors from 7 states. Never mind that. Let's just quietly move along and acquiesce, as he says there, to election theft. It says here, last time I checked, going back to what Mo Brooks said, because they lack the courage to take a difficult vote on the House or Senate floor, Brooks said in an interview. Last time I checked, that's why we were elected to Congress. I mean, we're supposed to make difficult decisions. We're supposed to stand up for what's right. We're supposed to stand up for what's true. But that's just it. So many people, more and more people with each passing day are afraid to expose the corruption. And I'm sure some of them, maybe a lot of them, as we're seeing all of these stories about the Chinese spy ring, they won't confront the corruption because they're part of it. That's certainly the case with the Biden family. You know about Peter Schweizer's book. He wrote Clinton Cash years ago. It was a bestseller. How the Clinton family has just cashed in on their powerful political positions and influence. And then more recently, 2.5 years ago, he wrote a follow-up, Secret Empires, I think it's called. Notice this from the New York Post. This is an older article. This is basically, it was following the publication of Secret Empires, and the Post wrote this lengthy piece back in March of 2018. So it's about 2.5 years old. And it says here, in 2004, current Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell and his wife, current U.S. Transportation Secretary Elaine Chao, had an average net worth of $3.1 million. That's in 2004. This article is written in 2018. It says 10 years later, that number had increased to somewhere between $9.2 million and $36 million. So in 10 years' time, they made as much, perhaps more than $30 million. It says one source of the windfall, according to a new book from Peter Schweizer, was a 2008 gift from Chow's father, James Chow, for somewhere between $5 million and $25 million. So they got this huge lump sum, this cash from her Chinese father. It says, but this gift could be seen as more than just a gift. It may have been acquired, according to Schweizer, thanks to the couple's fealty to China, the source of the Chow family fortune. It says, and that fealty may have occurred at the expense of the nation they had pledged to serve. Now listen to this and see if this doesn't sound familiar. Given what we're now finally seeing in mainstream news outlets. This is the New York Post. This isn't the New York Post revelations from just before the election about Hunter Biden. This is the New York Post 2.5 years ago, actually taking Peter Schweizer's book seriously. Hardly anyone else did. But it says here, rather than risk their careers taking bribes for potentially minuscule rewards, Schweizer points out how today's politicians are savvier, engaging in what he calls corruption by proxy. So what is he talking about here? Corruption by proxy? It says, while politicians and their spouses are often subject to rigid regulations on what gifts they can accept and what sort of business they can conduct, others around them, like their friends or children, have no such obstacles. In other words, a politician can't accept the money directly, but their children can, their friends can. It says here, so while politicians could theoretically wind up in prison for accepting $10,000 for doling out favors, establishing overseas connections that could land your children multi-million-dollar deals is harder to detect and often legal. See, this is where we get into a lot of gray areas. And boy, then the money can really flow. You can get right on that gravy train and turn into a millionaire overnight. Or you could be pocketing tens of millions. This quotes Schweizer, the article does. It says, foreign governments and oligarchs like this form of corruption because it gives them private and unfettered gateways to the corridors of Washington power, Schweizer writes. It says foreign entities cannot legally make campaign contributions, so using this approach creates an alternative way to curry favor and influence America's political leaders. Simply camouflaging these transactions as business agreements provides another shield of plausible deniability. Remember that phrase? That's from Tony Bobulinski's interview with Tucker Carlson before the presidential election, going back to October. And Bobulinski said he was just shocked this conversation he had with Jimmy Biden, Joe's brother, about why are you? Don't you realize your brother is a potential presidential candidate, and why are you getting into all these shady dealings? This could destroy his presidency. This could destroy his run for the presidency. Here's what Bobulinski said to Tucker Carlson, clip 8.
And I'm thinking about the Biden family, like, how are they doing this? I know Joe decided not to run in 2016, but what if he ran in the future? Aren't they taking political risk or headline risk? And I remember looking at Jim Biden and saying, how are you guys getting away with this? Like, aren't you concerned? And he looked at me and he laughed a little bit and said, plausible deniability.
He laughed and said plausible deniability. As long as we can say, look, it's, Joe doesn't get any of the money. And of course, Bobulinski's emails reveal exactly that. He's the big guy. He gets the 10% cut or the 50% cut in some cases. As long as you put Hunter out there, then you've got the perfect cover. You've got the plausible deniability. You could say it's Hunter's business. So he goes to Ukraine. He has no experience whatsoever in the natural gas oil industry. None of that. Then he goes off to China. Then he's getting this money coming in from Moscow. It's all over the place. And as Schweizer brings out in his book from 2018, it's on both sides of the aisles. Both sides of the aisle. It's Republicans and Democrats alike. Now, it's, as we've seen from this spying scandal, they have especially infiltrated the radical left. Democrats, they go right over to Silicon Valley, Northern California. It's just a hotbed for spying activity, as we've seen with Swalwell and others. So here comes Mitch McConnell, and do you think deep in his heart of hearts, and I know he's come together to some extent on the Supreme Court justices and other actions that this president has taken, but it was pretty clear coming in for President Trump that he didn't have too many friends in the Republican Party, and many have gotten on board, or they did previous to this recent election, because it helped them politically. And the Trump wave helped Mitch McConnell. And now that they think the tables have turned, they are wasting little time to jump ship. Here's Mitt Romney saying he would have never claimed anything like fraud or any voter irregularities when he lost the presidential run in 2012. This is clip 3.
You know, I think that the biggest concern that I have is that people here genuinely believe that somehow this election was stolen, and there's not evidence of that. The president was saying it was stolen even before Election Day happened. He said if he loses, it would be fraud. Well, no one knows that. I thought I was going to win, too, when I ran for president in 2012. I didn't go out and say fraud. That's, we have a process. We count the votes. That's the way it is. And I'm concerned that the cause of democracy here, as well as around the world, people look to us. We're the democratic leader of the world. What's going on now, I'm afraid, is terribly dispiriting to people all over the globe.
All over the globe, he says. People are dispirited by President Trump standing up to this fraud. You know what's happening, aside from the UK maybe, what's happening around the globe is people are stunned that they got away with this. They actually think this is going to go forward, and they can't believe it. There's countries all over Europe that know as soon as you introduce mass mail-in balloting, you are opening it up. You're opening the floodgates to fraudulent activity. That's what's stunning. Is around the world, you have these nations, you have these authoritarians, these dictators, these tyrants, these communists that know well what happened here because they do it themselves. And there's Mitt Romney again, a Republican, but in name only. There he is saying how dispiriting it is. And then before that, there's no evidence of fraud, no evidence of wrongdoing. So all of the affidavits, all of the computer studies, the Dominion studies, the reports, all of the recounts, now a signature recount in Cobb County, the video evidence, none of that matters. None of it matters. There's this, well, you know about the details regarding the so-called water main break. It's interesting when you go back and just look at some of the local media coverage from election night or the day after, and some of the details that we now know are lies, and how they were reported in real time as they were supposedly happening. This is from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution from November 4th, so the day after the election, and we know how they were up to no good, especially in Fulton County. The night of the election. It says there are 63,000 outstanding Fulton absentee ballots, which is about 27% of Georgia's 236 uncounted absentee ballots. That's enough to keep the nation biting its nails and waiting on Fulton. So in all the controversy, it was revolving around Fulton. And that's, of course, where you had the video of those 4 people coming back in to count, even as everybody else, including the poll watchers, were told to go home. And even that detail, part of it, is covered in this piece. The Constitution says, it wasn't a smooth election night landing. With the eyes of the nation upon Georgia's most populated county, there were some delays counting absentee ballots caused in part by a burst water pipe at State Farm Arena inside a room where ballots were being held. A complete and total lie. We now know from affidavits, from sworn testimony, that it was a leaking urinal in one of the bathrooms. Here it was a pipe burst in one of the counting rooms. So says the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. It says there was confusion and finger-pointing about whether or not Fulton sent home those helping count absentee ballots before the tally was finished. We'd always planned to have the final ballots being scanned on Wednesday, Barron said. I forget the first, Richard Barron. I'll come to him in just a second. He was one of the election officials there at the State Farm Arena. He says it was counterproductive to keep certain people there. Barron said he sent home crews who had been at it some 18 hours and left behind 5 people to scan all the ballots that had been open for them until 1 a.m. So evidently that's the group, the small group that stayed behind, and they kept right on counting. And that was just openly there, admitted in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. It says that didn't sit well with Republican Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger, who has often been at odds with Democrat-run Fulton over its elections management. But Barron said everyone in the state stopped counting by 2 a.m., and then it goes on and quotes this other official in the same region that said, well, I wouldn't have done it this way. It should have been done differently. So he says, yeah, I sent most of the people home. And then listen to what he said later. This is after this is after it emerged that I think this was after the video evidence. Is that right? I forget the date on this, but anyway, this is weeks later, and it's the same guy, Richard Barron, who just said in that article, yeah, I sent them home. Here's what he said later, clip 7.
We have adjudicated 132,200.
So we can play it for you later. It's just a short little clip, but it went for like 3 or 4 seconds, and he said, "Yeah, we didn't send anybody home, as has been reported." So he came out later, had a completely different story. And again, think about what would happen if we're talking about some of the politicians abandoning ship, but what if someone with the resources and the reporters and the funding that, like Fox News, for example, you've got a few like OAN, but even Newsmax the other day, they're calling Joe Biden the president-elect. I don't think their evening commentators are, but still, if you had a huge media operation like Fox News, that just this one point alone, or the pipe burst, we've gone through the montage before, all of these reporters, just everyone in unison, yeah, water main break, pipe burst, whatever it was, flooding, we had to send people home for that. All of the lies, all of the contradictions, there's a cover-up. That's why there's so many lies, because they're trying to cover up the fraud. And here you have these prominent Republicans coming out and saying, no evidence. Speaking of Romney, by the way, you know what he said following the president's phone call with the president of Ukraine? He said within just a few days of media reports, he said it was deeply troubling. And remember what he was troubled by? Remember what everyone was troubled by? That Donald Trump would suggest to the Ukrainian president that he investigate Hunter Biden's dealings with Burisma. Mitt Romney came out with a tweet on October 4th, 2019. He said, by all appearances, the president's brazen and unprecedented appeal to China and Ukraine to investigate Joe Biden is wrong and appalling. It's wrong. It's appalling that he would ask that on the phone call. And then later, he's interviewed, I believe this was with CNN, and they were talking about the impeachment, and they said, the reporters did, well, if this goes through impeachment or on into the Senate, he's in the Senate, have you decided how you're going to vote? This is what Romney said in October 2019, clip 10.
That's why with regards to that, as to whether the president should be removed or impeached, that's something which I would have to consider down the road. On that topic, I'm really not going to weigh in at this stage. I'd have to look at the evidence as it's presented.
He's not going to tell them then in October how he would vote because he'd have to first look at the evidence. Removing the president of the United States from office for a phone call where he suggested that Ukraine investigate Hunter Biden. Well, I'll look at the evidence. And of course, now we know Romney, he later did vote yes to abuse of power. He saw the evidence and he voted yes. This is a president that abused his power. He should be thrown out of office. With this subject, this mass voter fraud on so many different levels, he sees no evidence. He sees no evidence. He won't even look at it. There was a quote yesterday, an exchange with the reporter. This lady's asking Mr. Romney about if he's going to attend a hearing by Rob Johnson, who's basically called for a Senate hearing to consider what is so concerning to so many Americans, voter fraud. And listen to how Mitt Romney responds to this, clip 5.
Ron Johnson is going to have a hearing tomorrow on that very notion, on what he calls election irregularities, saying a large percentage of the American population don't view it as legitimate for a host of reasons. You were on that committee. Are you going to go, or are you going to protest? What will you do?
I'm not going to go to that. I don't think it's productive at this stage. If at some point down the road we want to look at whatever election irregularities occurred in 2020 as well as 2016 and 2012, sure, but those are marginal irregularities, meaning they're not substantial, and across the board they're not substantial enough to change the outcome of the election.
So one of his colleagues is having a hearing on election irregularities. He's on the committee, Mitt Romney, and he won't even go to it. He won't even go to the committee hearing on election irregularities. And then, furthermore, he says if there were any abnormalities or irregularities, it was just marginal, just a little bit here or there. It's certainly not enough that's going to overturn the results. So why even talk about this? See, a little over a year ago, it was just understood that Adam Schiff and his friends would present evidence, and Romney was the only Republican to vote for the president to be removed from office. The only one. It was just understood in his mind that there's evidence that needs to be reviewed, and he reviewed it. And sure enough, the president, he abused his power. Here, on the other hand, there's no evidence. Or if there is a little bit of fraudulent activity, it's just marginal. So we just don't even want to go to the hearing, and the president shouldn't even be talking about this. One last clip from Senator Romney, clip 4.
And when you tell people that voting doesn't work and that democracy can't work because we don't have legitimate elections, that's a very dangerous thing to be saying.
What's dangerous is stealing an election in plain sight for all of the world to see. That's what's dangerous. And President Trump and just those in his immediate vicinity are fighting against it. And they have the courage to stand against it. They have the courage to fight this through all the way to the end. There's a lot of people, a lot of powerful people, a lot of well-connected people, a lot of compromised people, a lot of wealthy and influential politicians that are getting money from all over the world. I don't know anything about Mr. Romney necessarily, but it's certainly obvious with his track record that there certainly isn't much love or affection for the Trump administration. So you keep thinking about 2 Kings chapter 14, and then all of this evidence that can, and then some of it still needs to be connected. You look at this story I went through yesterday. Sam and I have been reading more about this hack on Solar Winds, that outfit, I think in Austin, Texas. This vast trove of U.S. government emails targeted by a hack. This is reported at The Guardian just today. And it says the stunningly large and sophisticated operation reportedly targeted federal government networks and marks the biggest cyber raid against U.S. officials in years. And you know when this started? It started back in March. And you know that Solar Winds just happens to be a partner with Dominion? That's right. Dominion used its software. Dominion had it on its website up until yesterday. Got to take that down now. I mean, you don't want to have any connections to anything that would seem kind of shady or that would make it seem that maybe it wasn't the most secure election in history. So they just scrub it and move on. It says hackers gained entry into networks by getting more than 18,000 private and government users to download a tainted software update. Once inside, they were able to monitor internal emails at some of the top agencies in the U.S. Further on in this piece, it talks about how it started back in March. The software is called Orion. Solar Winds Orion is the package. It's used by tens of thousands of customers all over the world, as I said, including Dominion. But further on, the piece says that malware gave elite hackers remote access to an organization's networks so they could steal information. Doing so may not have been difficult. Listen to this. It says Vinoth Kumar, a secretary researcher, told Reuters that last year he alerted the company that anyone could access Solar Winds update server by using the password SolarWinds123. So you have widespread fraud, stealing, hacking, and then some kind of incompetence as well. SolarWinds123, not the most secure password in the world. Well, it talks about how that the breach was discovered by this cybersecurity company, FireEye. It says the apparent months-long timeline gave hackers ample time to extract information from many targets. Government officials have not yet stated which agencies were affected by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the State Department, and the Justice Department all use the software in question. It's used all across the government. The United States government, this big bloated bureaucracy of a government that runs the United States, they're all dependent on Orion, and it's been hacked since March. And so when you see these reports coming out confirming what we know, or at least assume, is pretty much widespread, at least in those crucial battleground states, these reports about glitches and votes flipping and the error rate, just the astronomical error rates, that alone should give us pause or should at least allow for further investigation. But no, Mitch McConnell, he's up first thing, day after the Electoral College speaks. The college spoke. And so we're here today. We're here today to congratulate the president-elect, Joe Biden. That's what we're supposed to believe, that he's the most popular president-elect in history, and this was a perfectly secure election. When we return, we'll revise our Bible study plans slightly, but be assured we will finish today's program with that. You're listening to Stephen Flurry, and this is the Trumpet Daily Radio Show. If you'd like to email the program, you can send comments to td@kpcg.fm. We'll be right back.
This is KPCG-FM, and this is the Trumpet Daily.
Education is something most people take for granted. We assume it is something one acquires after graduating from a college or university. Yet, the 20th century knowledge explosion has done little to solve the problems of this world. Crime, broken families, suicide, disease, mass illiteracy, and poverty. Why, in a world filled with so much advanced material knowledge, are there so many unsolvable problems? Why, after 6,000 years, has mankind been unable to find the solution to its escalating evils or to the number one problem it now faces, that of human survival? Our free booklet, Education with Vision, will show you what is wrong with education today. It will show you what is true education with vision and how to achieve it. Request your free copy of Education with Vision at our website, thetrumpet.com.
From the Philadelphia Church of God campus in Edstone, England, this is the Trumpet Daily Program with Stephen Flurry.
I've been speaking a fair bit in recent messages at the college and with other speaking assignments, just about the power that God backs his work with, and just how much we need, we rely upon that power to get the work done. Jesus, during his final Passover with the disciples, he said to them, "He that believes on me, the works that I do shall he do also, and greater works than these shall he do, because I go unto my Father." You're going to do greater works if you believe on me and go to the Father. And then, of course, after his resurrection, Jesus ascended to the right hand of God, and he's there at God's throne as our intercessor, our advocate, our high priest. He's the living high priest, the head of this church. And he goes to the Father, as it says there. That's John 14 and verse 12. He goes to the Father on our behalf, as he said. God's going to perform even greater works if we'll believe in faith. When you look at God's work today and considering, just how few we are, it's not a huge organization by any means, but we have the truth, and we have God's power, and given what's left to do before Jesus Christ's return, we're going to have to draw on the power of God all the more so, and be men and women of faith, Christians who walk by faith, not by sight, not by the way that it might look, because like I've read to you from Romans 4, we've got to go on and believe. When it looks like all hope is gone, we hope on, just like Abraham did. We believe in the power of God. We believe in God's timely intervention into the affairs of men. We believe in the fulfillment of Bible prophecies all over the place, being fulfilled. In itself, what a faith builder that is. I just want to take you through a powerful example here in John chapter 11. An example of living faith, and it also exposes a great weakness in human nature, just how easy it is for us to walk by sight and not by faith, as the Bible says we should. This is the example of Jesus and Lazarus and the others that are in this story. John 11 and verse 32, it says, "Then when Mary was come where Jesus was and saw him, she fell down at his feet saying unto him, Lord, if you had been here, my brother had not died. So these relatives of Lazarus, they were just overcome with grief. And then Christ said he was on his way there to heal this man, to raise him from the dead. He got there, and these people were distraught. They didn't know what to do, and they were, I think, somewhat upset by the fact that Christ didn't get there earlier to heal him before he died. Verse 33, it says, when Jesus therefore saw her weeping, and the Jews also weeping, which came with her, he groaned in the spirit and was troubled. He groaned. He throughout. We kind of picked it up here in the middle of the story, but he had said the sickness is not unto death. So don't worry. God's going to be glorified by what happens here. He had said, our friend Lazarus sleeps, but I go that I may awake him out of sleep. He had said, your brother shall rise again. And then, of course, he made the statement, I am the resurrection and the life. He had said all these things, and yet still these people were inconsolable. They were distraught. They were almost hysterical, and they shouldn't have been. Verse 35, it says, Jesus wept. Jesus wept. He wept because they didn't believe, and they should have. He wept because their faith was so weak. He was surrounded by people that had heard him speak powerfully for God. They saw him perform many miracles. And yet, here they have this shamefully impoverished faith. So weak. That's the way we are humanly. Just so weak. So pitifully weak. Verse 36 says, then said the Jews, behold, how he loved him. And some of them said, could not this man which opened the eyes of the blind have caused that even this man should not have died? Couldn't he have kept him from dying? Why didn't he get here sooner? Now think of it. They were talking about Jesus Christ, the Word of God made flesh. And they were, I guess they had the faith to think that Christ could have healed him while he was still living, but there's no way you can resurrect him from the dead. There's no way that could happen. It's too late. My father wrote in the book, John's Gospel, The Love of God, he said, we must be thinking and studying about God resurrecting us. However, we cannot attain that goal unless we build the faith of Christ and exercise it today. He says God wants our minds on being resurrected. He helps in every way he can, so we will build the faith needed to be resurrected. We will have lost everything forever if we are not resurrected into God's family. He wants our minds, God wants our minds on being resurrected. We're going to follow in the steps of Jesus Christ. Romans 8 brings that out. If we suffer together with Christ, we're going to be glorified in the same way that Jesus Christ has been. He's the firstborn among many who are to be born again of the Spirit. John 3, 1 Corinthians 15. Plenty of passages you can look into. We'll just focus here on John 11, verse 40. Jesus said unto her, said I not unto you that if you would believe, you should see the glory of God? You see, we just have to believe. We just have to believe what God says. We just have to believe what Jesus Christ teaches us. We believe it in faith. We trust them in faith. Verse 41, then they took away the stone from the place where the dead was laid. And Jesus lifted up his eyes and said, Father, I thank you that you have heard me. That's really a pretty amazing little detail. right there at the outset of his prayer. He thanks God for hearing him. Now, that's some kind of boldness. That's some kind of confidence. Here is Jesus Christ entering into the throne room of God in prayer, and he knows the Father is listening. He knows the Father is paying attention. His relationship with God was that close. It was that intimate. He just knew. God, I thank you that you have heard me. It says further, and I know you hear me always. That's another very bold and confident thing to say. But why shouldn't we be that bold and that confident? Like Jesus said in John 14, now we've got an advocate as well. Now we've got Jesus Christ together with God on that heavenly throne. Think of the environment that we're heading into when we kneel down before God in prayer. Think of the royal environment. Think of the power emanating from that throne. Think of the power that brought the universe into existence. And that we can go to this God, this same being, and believe. Now, there's lots of other points to make about prayer, answered prayer in particular. We've got to be obedient to God, submit to his government, and believe in faith and pray in Jesus Christ's name, and so many of these other details that we'll have to leave for another study. But what does this say about Jesus Christ's prayer life? I know that you hear me always. I know you always hear me. It says, but because of the people which stand by, I said it, that they may believe that you have sent me. And when he had thus spoken, he cried with a loud voice, Lazarus, come forth. When he had uttered that short prayer, 15, 20-second prayer, then he cries with a loud voice and says, Lazarus, come forth. That's some confident, bold action, faith-filled action. He thanks the Father who sent him to this earth and then resurrects Lazarus from the dead. That's the kind of resurrection from the dead faith that we all need, particularly as we see this world just groping in darkness. Verse 44 says, and he that was dead came forth, bound hand and foot with grave clothes, and his face was bound about with a napkin. And Jesus said unto him, or them rather, loose him and let him go. And then many of the Jews, which came to Mary and had seen the things which Jesus did, believed on him. You can only imagine how much attention that this would have gotten and how quickly the word would have spread. Again, he performed miracles in front of thousands and thousands of people. People saw the hand of God. They witnessed the hand of God working through Jesus Christ. And yet, in the end, Jesus Christ was persecuted unto death, crucified. And there were just a handful of disciples there at the first Pentecost. A handful of disciples, 120 disciples, Acts 1 says. Even with all of these mighty miracles, I talked last week about prophets that really didn't perform that many mighty miracles out in the open for everyone to see. It was a miraculous work that they did, and certainly that God was speaking through them was a miracle in and of itself. But the world rejects these kinds of displays of righteousness and faith. And even when Jesus Christ is on this earth and raises a man from the dead, he still is rejected He still is persecuted. He still is crucified. It says a lot about the world we live in today. It says a lot about whose world this is. This is not God's world. This is Satan's world. Now, God's fulfilling his purpose and plan. God intervenes where necessary in fulfillment of that divine purpose. But he's left Satan on the throne of this earth for nearly 6,000 years so that we might finally learn a powerful lesson about how it won't work unless we bring God right into the center of all that we do. I was reading in the Former Prophets book this morning, the chapter on David's heart. And my father made the point there about how God just loved David because David wanted him involved in everything he was doing. When that's happening, you can really go to God with this kind of confident request and even thank him ahead of time for hearing you before you then make the request known. When we come back, we'll conclude today's show with just a few emails, some feedback that's come in recent days. You're listening to Stephen Flurry, and this is the Trumpet Daily Radio Show. We'll be right back.
This is KPCG FM, and this is the Trumpet Daily. The Armstrong College Bible Correspondence Course is a distance learning program that makes the Bible clear and understandable. The correspondence course enables enrollees to learn what the Bible itself says about subjects that affect you and the world you live in. This fascinating Bible course highlights and proves what the Bible says about morality, war, religion, terrorism, and other current events, focusing on the root causes of this world's many problems facing man, as well as their solutions. The Bible and this course also focuses on the reason mankind was created in the first place, the way to happiness, accomplishment, and fulfillment, as well as the truth behind important doctrinal questions, such as what happens after we die, the nature of God, the resurrection, the millennium, and other critical subjects. Enroll today in the Herbert W. Armstrong Bible Correspondence Course. Email your request to td@kpcg.fm or visit thetrumpet.com. From the Philadelphia Church of God campus in Edstone, England, this is the Trumpet Daily Program with Stephen Flurry.
Few comments from some of our listeners. This one here says, like the fact that you've got a Union Jack in the background. Thank you. So many British patriots are right behind you. Another one here says, it's so frustrating and disgusting that this level of fraud and corruption is happening, and no FBI, no Justice Department. What is going on in our country? It is beyond mind-boggling. Maybe we, the people, should file a lawsuit about the election fraud and our legal rights to a fair election, as our legal rights to a fair election was denied us. Another one here says, I just love your dedicated passion and sharing the truth in this dark, dark world. God bless you. Another writes, the Trumpet Daily often talks of the evil being exposed by this election, and rightfully so. The mighty hand of God is now being revealed as well. Thank you for the straightforward, provable truth, and have a peaceful, productive week. Another one here says, another fantastic show. Thank you so much, Mr. Flurry. God protect you and your vital message. And then another one writes, thank you for telling the truth. I truly hope everyone in the U.S. heard your message. Well, wouldn't that be nice if it just went out to everyone? One day it will. And then finally, we love and enjoy our freedom because we keep God's law. All the glory goes to God. So if you'd like to submit some emails, I have some other that came into the account, just in the last day, I'll try to cut and paste those over to a new set of notes so we can give some of that feedback to you listeners abroad. Email us at td@kpcg.fm. You're listening to Stephen Flurry, and this is the Trumpet Daily Radio Show. We thank you for joining us on today's show, and we'll see you tomorrow.